Hello, my name is Cynthia Ng and you are tuning in to AWANI Review. We are very excited to be back after a 3-month-long break. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has left a tremendous impact on industries and businesses, forcing many to adapt and rethink ways to stay resilient. For now, on this show today, on our very first show after the MCO, we want to look at how this event booking platform, it's called VMO Rocks, and how they are adapting to the current environment. And joining me today is Vincent Kok. He is the co-founder and chief evangelist of VMO. Thank you so much. I'm very excited to start this conversation with you. Particularly because we know that the event space is probably one of the most hard hit by the pandemic. But before we get into that, I'd like to know a bit more about VMO Rocks. Give us a brief picture about this company. I know it started in 2014.
That's right.
Tell us what it does and what gap did you see in the market that led you to start this company?
Sure. So we started in 2014, like you mentioned. So what happened was that prior to that, we were in travel tech. So we were organizing a lot of workshops. So in travel tech, we built systems to book hotel rooms to stay. But guess what? We found that we couldn't book any hotel rooms to do meetings in. So we realized that, wow, that's a big gap here. So what happened was that in 2014, the co-founders decided that we would start up a platform to be an online booking platform for event venues and services. Well, it started with event venues first.
So it's like Airbnb, but for events.
That's right. That's a good analogy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what led to VMO? Because VMO is predominantly F&B, event space, caterers, and linking them together to users who wants to say have a party or a wedding, right?
Yeah.
So tell us about
that. So it started with that idea of booking spaces, right? And we started talking to hotels. Hotels at that time were not quite ready for us. So we then realigned our focus and started talking to restaurants and cafes. Restaurant and cafes started coming in one by one, and as more and more of them came in, they started telling their friends about it. And that's how we grew from, I think, about 40 when we started to over 2,000 now. And it started with venues, and then we realized that when you organize a party, it's always not just about a venue. There's food, there is balloons, there are, what else? Decorators involved. So we put it all together. It became a one-stop solution for booking everything to do with events.
All right. I'd like to get more into the company just a bit later.
Sure.
Bringing this back closer to where we are right now, right? The events, meetings, wedding space are particularly hard hit by the pandemic.
Yep.
In those 3 months of the movement control order, can you give us a sense of the impact to the industry, what it has done to the industry?
Well, we went from a few 100,000 ringgit worth of bookings to zero in that space of 1 week. Right? And then there were cancellations along the way because people didn't know what was happening. There were no guidelines as to when they could resume. So people started canceling, which made sense, right? If you don't know what's happening, you definitely want to have a refund. So fortunately, we were able to refund most of those monies to those people who wanted to cancel. What we saw was that while birthdays were being canceled, people who were planning weddings, which are next year or late this year, they were still holding on. They were wondering what was happening. And we worked with the operators as well to figure out with them what were their policies with regard to cancellation. Would they allow for cancellation, or would they want the user to continue but allow for postponement? So a lot of them actually allowed for later postponements without penalties.
So a company like VMO is highly dependent on the events industry, right? How has that affected revenue? I know you said that a lot, maybe probably waking up every day to cancellation, cause of cancellation. You know, how has it impacted the company itself?
Well, definitely affected us because we went from some revenue to zero revenue in the space of that week, right? But fortunately, we were able to pivot very quickly. March 16th, the MCO was announced. March 18th was the day of the MCO. By March 17th, we already had a working system for food delivery, right? It was not perfect. It's still work in progress. It was very much work in progress on that day one, but we started with 7 operators on board. we have now got over 1,000 providers on board.
So from 7 operators to 1,000 in a 3-month plus
less
duration.
actually. I think we grew that to in a space of 1 month and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, to that number.
How exactly did you pivot so fast? Like you said, MCO was announced on March 16, and the very next day you rolled this out. Was that something that was in the pipeline even before the MCO?
It was something in the pipeline, something that we had already planned. We just didn't expect to execute it so soon. So, but because we already had that in mind, then we knew how to carry that out, right? Not perfectly initially. I won't say we're perfect even now, but at least with each week, we're getting better at it.
Okay, so the question really is, why get into this space when you have the likes of
Grab,
Food Panda, and all these other players that are already dominating a very, very competitive space?
Okay.
So tell us about that decision and what will set you apart?
Well, I think the reason why we got into it was because we wanted to be a complete solution for our F&B merchants. We know that we would not be exclusive from day one, but which is fine because we would be finding market niches for them anyway. And with it, we were just offering them alternative channels, right? So we don't go in saying that you must be exclusive with us. No way, right? Because Grab and Food Panda would be the gorillas in town, right? So what we did was we started looking at how we could help them enhance and maybe drive additional revenue. So even if it's 100 ringgit extra for them, that was good money, right? But also what we started looking at was how can we bring the kind of food merchants that the others won't bring on board, right? So like hawkers, like home kitchens, which don't have systems back end, right? But they would still want to be able to take orders. So our solution catered to them.
Okay. I did go on your website and just check out some of the merchants, and I did notice, like you say, hawker stalls, a lot of mom and pop restaurants, and this, like you say, they usually lack the infrastructure and resources to go online, right? So tell us about your plans to grow your presence in this particular segment, which I think is probably what sets you apart from the bigger players.
Yeah. So with that, with home kitchens coming on board, right, realize as we move into the RMCO, right, some of these home kitchens are very good at making a certain product. So like some of them specialize in nyonya kueh or kueh, one particular type of kueh, right? And these are offerings that could complement events as well. So like, for example, if you make angku, the red kueh for I think, for celebratory events, right? That could be an added dimension, right, that they could offer for events, right? So that's how we are setting ourselves apart.
In that 3-month period during the MCO, did you have to lay off staff?
Fortunately, we didn't, right? But we were always very lean anyway. So there were two things that kind of helped us. I think one was because we had raised funding right at the beginning of the MCO, and that helped us as well.
And tell us about those plans, right? Earlier, before we started rolling, you were talking about how this fundraising just came right before, and you're supposed to get it up and running during April, during the MCO itself.
Yes,
and you still got the backing from investors. Yes. So tell us about that journey and conversation, what went on?
Okay, I guess we were fortunate in the sense that we already had started the pre-selling prior to the MCO. We had wanted to go on earlier, but we decided to time it slightly later just to build up enough momentum. To that extent, I'm very grateful to our investors who had come in because they kept the faith and said, okay, we'll continue to back you, right? Even though the MCO was happening, I think we see where you're going with this, and we see that the potential is going to be big. It may go through a few months or even half a year of downturn, but you should be able to recover from there. So they continued to back us with that.
Yeah. So what is the long-term plan for?
So the long-term plan for us is that now as part of our group, we not just have VMO, which does event bookings, but we have Food Advisor, which is food discovery, and then we have Buletin, which does alcohol sales as well, alcohol on demand, right? Growing from there, we will be adding more and more F&B services, right? Not just front-facing to consumer, but also to the merchants as well, bringing supplies to merchants, and then from there up to the consumer.
to talk a bit about Buletin.
Oh, Boozy.
Buletin, right? So it's their on-demand alcohol delivery platform,
Yep.
Which I believe gained quite a bit of traction during the
That's
MCO
right.
when people were forced to stay at home,
People drank more.
drink more. But that's good business for you.
Yes, it worked out well for us in that sense that as people had time at home, they drank more, right? So and every time, so because PM announced extensions every 2 weeks, every time he announced an extension, you see a spike, right? So people like, we can't get out yet, so we need to top up our alcohol. So it was a very good fit, right? So for us, moving forward, it's that we see that there's more opportunities for us to be able to sell alcohol, not just for events, but even for now that we do food delivery, that could be an extension of the services that we could offer. So if you don't want to come out to dine, but you want to do a party at home, we can have the alcohol apart from the food delivered to you.
I would like to turn the discussion to weddings because I read in an article, I think it was November 2017, it said that 40% of your revenue is from weddings. Is that still the same?
It's about 40%. Yes, it's still close to that.
This was before MCO.
Yeah, that was before MCO.
Yes.
But I think as of last year, a lot of our revenues were coming more from corporate already.
Okay.
But yeah, weddings would still be the biggest single sector for private events.
All right. So right now, with all that's happening, and you said that people are taking a more wait-and-see approach when it comes to weddings, how are you navigating this sector?
What's happening, I think, in the next few months is that corporate and private events like birthday parties, small groups, will probably dominate our sales. We're already seeing an increased number of inquiries on a daily basis ever since we entered June 10, right? We didn't expect actually, surprisingly, the number of inquiries for events coming back in has been quite fast, right? So it's a happy development.
Okay, so you definitely see this consumer confidence have improved over the past few weeks.
Correct.
And I also believe this could be because the government has announced that events are now allowed to take place up to a maximum of 250 people. Yeah. I'm sure that brought a sense of relief to
That brought
you.
a sense of relief in the sense that there are clear guidelines on what kind of events can be held, what are the protocols that operators have to follow. So that gave them a room to know what they can do, what they can't do, right? I think when the rules in place, then it's easier for people to move, right? Without rules, if everything is up in the air, then people just don't know what to do. Yeah. So once the rules came out, I think we saw an acceleration of inquiries coming back in. Yeah. So we're already getting inquiries for weddings in November and December again.
What are some of the decisions that you had to make that you would consider challenging, and if you can share your experience as an entrepreneur during this time?
Well, I think we were very fortunate. We were blessed that we didn't have to do hard decisions like lay off people or reduce their salaries or cut things, right? So we just continued. But obviously, one of the things that we had to do more was do further investment. So for example, the delivery platform, there was additional investment at a time when most people are like holding on to the money, right? But fortunately for us, we had some funds to allow us to do that. So that paved the way for us to take us to the next level.
What were the initial plans for 2020, and how did the MCO derail those plans?
I wouldn't say it entirely derailed our plans. I think it kind of accelerated the food delivery part of the business. I think it's affected us on the B2B side of the business because one part of the business which was supposed to grow, we were supposed to grow big into this year was really the B2B services, where we connect suppliers to F&B operators. So it goes from food supplies to even contractors. And doing fit up for their kitchens, right? So obviously, new kitchens or new restaurants are going to be a bit less of a development this year, yeah. But I think going into the future, as the recovery comes in, we should see a rise in that.
I think one of the biggest tests right now is really that how do you bring a business back in the environment where that COVID-19 threat is still there, it's still looming, right?
Real.
And economies are still reeling. Do you see brighter days ahead? No, how fast can the industry get back on its feet? I think that's the question.
Okay. I was trying to be pessimistic with my estimation. So I didn't expect. I was projecting perhaps events, birthday parties even, would only start coming back in September, after 31st August. To our surprise, it's actually people are already requesting for them in July, in August, right? So some of the earlier ones are end of this month. Sorry, is it July? It's July, right? So yeah, in July, they're already asking for their events to be held.
So it's more optimistic than you had?
It's far more optimistic than what I expected, yeah. So I actually have a greater sense of worry than they do.
Okay, and let's talk a bit about what all these initiatives that have been announced, especially to help the small, medium and businesses, enterprises, right? And how has that benefited a company like yours, a startup? Because prior to, during the MCO, and I spoke with some, startup players, and they said like, oh yeah, the government has announced a lot of initiatives for businesses, but not so much for startups. So is there truth in that? And what do you think about it?
It would have been true, I think, during the first few weeks of the MCO, but with Penjana coming in, the last round of funding, or rather the initiatives, actually tackled the startup community as well, so which is being managed by MAVCAP now. So MAVCAP is actually driving that initiative. They raised, I think they had 100 million ringgit fund, not entirely disbursed yet. I think they're reviewing. And they did say that if they do run out that 100 million, what they'll do is they'll ask for more.
For the events and F&B industry, what would be the changes that you might see in the coming year or even years, seeing that COVID-19 is probably going to be present for a very long time? And how do you see the way businesses will change and how you do things, and how would that affect the business?
I think it's been mentioned a lot, right? So throughout the MCO, people were talking about digitalization, about how you should bring your business online. And one of the key challenges, I think, for most F&B merchants is, how do I bring my business online effectively, cost effectively, and quickly enough that I don't have to wait months for this? And so that was one of the areas that we addressed with our system, that we should be able to bring somebody on. If he says in the morning that he wants to get on board by the evening, we've already got him online, right? So, and without too much cost for him to endure.
So how does that work? Let's say I have a small little shop selling curry puff, for instance, right? And for somebody like me, a small company may not be able to get on bigger platforms because of certain requirements that you need to have. So what's the difference to be on VMO?
For us, it's free to list. We didn't want to charge them anything. We didn't require them to buy a new hardware. You don't have to have a POS system in place. All you need is your existing phone, whether it's an Android phone or an iPhone, doesn't matter. As long as you have WhatsApp on it, you'll be able to take orders.
So via WhatsApp?
Yeah.
So you go on your website, we go on the website and you click order, it goes straight to
It sends
WhatsApp.
the order straight to their WhatsApp, right? So it'll tell them, okay, you've got an order for 10 pieces of bachang, right? And that's it, deliver when and this is the time, and it's already paid.
How do you monetize from that?
So how we monetize, so during the initial part of the MCO, we actually gave it free. We didn't even charge for any transaction charges. But right now, what we're doing is we're charging 10% on success. Right? So the operator doesn't have to put up any outlay at all. She or he only needs to pay a 10% fee when there is a successful booking.
At 10%, is it lower than all the other players?
It is. It is quite a lot lower than the big players in town. Yeah.
All right. So we talked about how you've just concluded your fundraising.
Yep.
And talk about those plans then.
Okay. What next after that?
What's next? Yeah. So is there going to be? Are you still on expansion mode? Locally, regionally, where can we see? Yeah.
Okay.
Where can we see VMO?
I guess what we'll be doing is that we will be expanding locally. I don't think so. We will be expanding regionally for the short term. For one reason, it's just going to be hard to travel. But I think where Malaysia is concerned, it's a huge market anyway. So prior to the MCO, this is the 2017 Department of Statistics numbers, right? So not my numbers, but their statistics. The numbers was the industry is 82.8 billion ringgit, right? So even with a reduction, if MCO does affect, I don't think so it will drop by half. It might drop by 20%, right? So it will still be a sizable industry to tap into. So there's a lot of room to grow for the F&B industry in Malaysia.
And currently, VMO is predominantly in Kuala Lumpur, right? Klang Valley. So is the plan to go beyond that?
One of the upsides of the MCO was that it allowed us to expand into Penang very cost effectively, because we didn't have to go to Penang to onboard merchants from there. So it was all through WhatsApp, just reaching out to them on WhatsApp and asking them, telling them what we do and what they needed to do to get on board. And they started coming on board, right? And we started getting orders from Penang as well, so which was good for us.
Okay. The onboarding process I found was quite interesting, because this acceleration from seven merchants to 1,000, this all happened during the MCO, where you can't go out to meet them.
That's
so
right.
how did you do it? Did you manually call them up one by one, or how?
Well, it was all through WhatsApp, WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. Right? So we were reaching out to them. We were saying, hey, we've got this platform. It's free to list, and we only charge you. In fact, we don't even charge you right at this time, right? Just list it, right? And they started coming on board, right? So one by one, was 1, then 10, then 20, then more and more came on board. I think there were some of them who were very good. They started telling their friends about it, and then brought their friends in as well.
So word of mouth?
Word of mouth actually played a big part in that growth as well.
What would be your advice to people who are facing similar, probably predicaments that are affected by this COVID-19 and MCO? What would you say to them?
A lot of the learnings that I got, how I reacted this time, was actually learnings that I had from 1997, which was
during the financial crisis.
Yes.
So how has this been different compared to the financial crisis?
Well, I think in terms of government funding and government support, there's far more government support this time. But also, I guess that prepared me for how I should react this time. I think 1997 schooled me in running a very lean operation, right? So that there would be no frills. It also schooled me in the business that I should go into, which should not be a vanity business. I was in a vanity business at that time. So when a downturn hits, vanity projects go out the window very, very quickly. Food and beverage is something that everybody needs, right? Good days, bad days, maybe you eat less, right? But you still eat, right? So that kind of prepared us for this time around. But I also think that what it did was, for us, was that it taught us to be resilient and taught us how to negotiate with partners as well. So talking to operators to advise them on how they should tackle the issue of cancellations. What were the ways, rather than allow for cancellations? So yes, we understand that you prefer not to allow for cancellations. Then what you should do then is that you should allow for extended postponements.
And how did you bring your team along during this time? I'm sure their roles had changed as well.
Yes, so for that initial period, we were very focused on food delivery. So we became food deliverers. We started organizing the team around food delivery and how to manage the food delivery challenges. And there are a lot of challenges. Actually, far more challenges than doing an event, because it's very instant.
Well, thanks for sharing your experience and your journey, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
For your growth and expansion plans for VMO. That was Vincent Kok, the co-founder of VMO Rocks, and you have been watching AWANI Review. My name is Cynthia Ng. Till we see you again next time. Thanks for watching.